Good day, everybody. I'm Steve Levitsky. I'm director of the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies. Welcome to our Tuesday seminar, which is a webinar today on the recent Chilean election, where looks like an overwhelming communist victory, right? Maybe not. We have four terrific speakers. Only one of whom is Chilean, but that's okay.
But we all have second.
But all worked for many years in Chile, who are going to analyze the results of the election, what happened, why we see this outcome, and what we can expect going forward. I'm going to introduce the four of them pretty quickly and let them jump in, and hopefully we'll have a good chunk of time still for questions and conversation. So without further ado, David Altman is professor of political science at the Catholic University in Chile. I should note before going on that he's a former star visiting scholar here at Dr. Class. He's a specialist in democratic institutions and the quality of democracy, and author of two outstanding books on referenda, comparatively a book called Direct Democracy Worldwide, which was published in 2011. Wow, that long ago, by Cambridge University Press. And secondly, Citizenship in Contemporary Direct Democracy, which was published by Cambridge in 2019. I highly recommend both of those books. Welcome, David. Rossana Castiglioni is another star former visiting scholar here at Dr. Class. Do you two know each other? She's a professor of political science at the Diego Portales University in Chile, also the dean of social science and history at the UDP. She's a specialist in comparative social policy and democratic representation, and author of the outstanding book, The Politics of Social Policy Change in Chile and Uruguay, Retrenchment versus Maintenance. Welcome, Rossana. Thanks for taking the time. Our third speaker is here with us in person, Lucia Dammert, who is professor of international relations at the University of Santiago in Chile, also a former visiting scholar here at Dr. Class, a specialist in public security, in police reform, and most recently organized crime. She's written more books than I can count, much less list, but I'll give you three of them: Fear and Crime in Latin America, Public Security and Police Reform in Latin America, and Maras, Gang Violence and Security. She also served as chief advisor to President Boric in Chile in 2002. Finally, last but far from least, Patricio Navia is professor of liberal studies at NYU and professor of political science at Diego Portales University. He has written and published widely on a wide range of issues related to democracy, political parties, legislative politics, and elections, both in Chile and across Latin America. Pato, it's great to have you. Thanks for taking the time. So we will start with, we'll go in alphabetical order, which means we start with David.
Thank you. I don't see Fran, but I see Alisha and I see you. So over there.
Fran's here.
Okay, the screen is too small. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here with you. And before I start, I just want to say that let me keep things simple. Of course, considering what we know so far, there is a lot of data that we are processing these days. So, but I have some bold points to make, essentially four major and simple points. First, Chile is not a political center that old 1988 divide has lost its ability to explain political behavior. Today, the estallido/plebiscite 2022 help us to understand voting patterns much better, far better. And fourth, what we are seeing now, it's reactive, it's not ideological. Okay, so let me start with the first point. Chile is not necessarily shifting to the right. The big picture, what I say is that what happened is that the center collapsed. Voters did not suddenly become right-wing, they simply abandoned the left. And because the center evaporated, the only available space, so to say, to land was the right. So this is not an ideological realignment, this is a reaction to a political vacuum. The second point is that the center that helped Boric now supports the right. The problem is supply, not demand. So this leads us to a following question: why did the center collapse? And to understand that, I think that we should look to the long roots of the Chilean crisis. So I divide the last, since transition till today, into big chunks of time frames. The Chilean miracle, which covered, there were 5 presidents or 25 years. We know that that period produced, delivered a real progress in terms of human development, economic growth, rule of law, and somehow an honest government. But it also produced a rapidly expanded and very fragile middle class. Chile, in a way, became a victim of its own success. And our old institutions, including the electoral system, simply failed to adapt to these new demands that were created. Pato and Rossana know much better than I about these topics. So the second stage, and probably the beginning of the whole crisis, start with the second Bachelet. The scenes began to burst. And Bachelet pushed a very ambitious and frankly, somehow irresponsible package of reforms all at once. I don't know if you remember, but we were dealing simultaneously with electoral reform, tax reform, education reform, labor reform, abortion rights, and even constitutional reforms. Everything at the same time. You remember encuentros locales autoconvocados, de cabildos. I mean, there were so innovations simultaneously at the same time. This overload reactivated all tensions and created new ones. It didn't create the crisis, of course, but it acted as a catalyst that exposed accumulated pressure. In short, in a way, Bachelet, during her second government, she was steering a hornet's nest. And then we came to Piñera, that was hit by a perfect storm. You know, estallido social, then the COVID pandemic. These shocks created fear, anger, and widespread instability. This event pushed already a strange system to the breaking point. It didn't break, but it was there. And then we have Boric's situation, which I believe he misread his mandate. He won with borrowed votes from the center, but governed as he had a strong mandate for transformative change. His early naivete led to significant mistakes, with, let's say, mention just a few of them, with the Mapuche conflict, with the amnesties to the first line, la primera línea del estallido, and even democratic backsliding pressures, for example, trying to exclude immigrants from these elections of last Sunday, especially because of the huge chunk of Venezuelan voters that we have in Chile, which are considered for the government to be conservative. So all of this package deal was reinforced by a tone of moral superiority heard, if you remember, with the George Jackson remarks. And the real stability of this government came only once they brought into the cabinet Mario Marcel and Carolina Toad. So that was basically, if I have to put a time, I would say the second Bachelet's government. So the third point is that the traditional divide of rooted in the 1988 plebiscite has lost its.
Son los anarcos.
Froze.
Solo pasamos a pasar el estallido social.
Cleavage.
I
Just
think the
to
Castro
remember-
administration,
Excuse me?
You were
we lost
frozen.
you for a while. You were frozen for a while, David, for a few seconds.
Oh, okay. So I don't know where I stopped.
You were starting to make your third
Point.
Okay, the third point is that the divides rooted in the 1988 plebiscite, Pinochet, anti-Pinochet, lost a lot of its explanatory power. Today, the estallido social cycle explains voting behavior far better than the old Pinochet, anti-Pinochet plebiscite of the late 80s. Just remember that about 60% of today's electorate were minors or not even born in 1988. 60%. After the estallido, the constitutional failures, the pandemic, and the collapse of the center, I don't know, it's hard to say, but we may not still grasp how traumatic the estallido social was and how far-reaching its consequences are. So a push for stability / order / tranquility, it's entirely predictable. This is about stability. It's not about ideology. Again, despite all this, this shift that we have seen and that the press, with huge headlines put in every cover in every newspaper in Chile and in the region, this shift is reactive. It's not ideological. Despite everything, I'm pretty sure, at least the public opinion shows us that most Chileans still think from the center. Yes, of course, there is a conservative shift on security and regular immigration, but at this point, Jara and Kast devoted exactly the same amount of time to both those concerns. But we don't see so far a broader move to the right on taxation, same-sex marriage, abortion, drugs, individual freedoms, etc., etc. So the problem, and here I'm getting into Lucia's land, she knows much better than I, is not overall crime levels. It's the new form of violence, narco groups, organized crime, territorial control. I mean, she will mention that much better than I do. And perceptions often matter much more than data. In this environment, the right is perceived as a somehow reliable provider of order. But again, this is not ideology. This is fear. So to finish, because I have another 20 seconds to wrap up, Chile is not experiencing a true right-wing shift. People did not suddenly become conservative. Chile no se enfachizó, to say it in Spanish, right? What collapsed is the political center. And I'm afraid that both the left and the right are misreading that collapse. The left faces a profound credibility problem, and the right risks confusing fear and exhaustion with ideological support, very much as Boric did in 2021. So, bottom line, Chile 2025 is not turning right. Chile 2025 is politically homeless in the center. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Rossana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. I have to make an announcement. Since 15 days and 6 hours ago, I'm not Dean of Social Science. So that's, I'm full professor, that's all. I'm very happy one. So, I will say a few things about the election and then sort of talk about the broader picture. Regarding the election, I think the only thing that didn't surprise me was that Jara and Kast passed the first round. The rest was surprising or shocking, depending of how do you read it. The difference between the two of them was really tight. That was something that I don't know if everyone was expecting. the Partido de la Gente, led by Franco Parisi, and we are talking about a guy that was most of the time living abroad, was surrounded by scandals of every type, some of them really juicy and interesting if you like gossip. He did most of his campaign over social media, and he got 2.5 million votes, which is for me really, really surprising. Then Evelyn Matei, who is a very experienced politician, has a she's a very well-known person. She has been minister. I don't know, very experienced politician, got nearly tied with a newcomer, someone that put together a political party very recently, who was quite outrageous in the things he said, and he's with her, almost in the same, sharing the same space. The other thing that I found interesting, and I'm not going to say a lot about that because David did that, is that the political centers seem to disappear, and traditional parties, not only the center, like, for example, Evelyn Matei represented traditional parties in a way, and she did really bad. So I think it's a combination. The political center is vanishing, but also traditional parties are vanishing from this scene. Perhaps you can say, well, the left, the Communist Party, but that's about it. The other thing, well, that we can say is that the future looks really grim for Jara. I mean, and this is very, I'm saying something really obvious. If you put together all the votes of the right, there is no way she's going to win. Particularly if you heard the things that Franco Parisi said really recently. He's not willing to give his votes away. He made this really, really clear right after the election. Things will get complex probably, and I guess Patricio is going to talk about that a lot because he knows much more than I do about these issues. But if they, I mean, either of them, Jara or Cast, and I'm betting like everyone that Cast is going to win, want to pass laws with constitutional rank, they will have to negotiate. And but this is a double play. First, they will have to convince someone from the opposition, but then they have to instill discipline within the right-wing coalition, if there is such a thing. And that is going to be, I don't think that's going to be that easy. There are some issues, and I am sure Lucia, who knows a lot about this, will talk about that. Some issues like public safety, and I don't know, public safety in general, and that they will have more ground to talk about. But in other issues, I don't see it easily. Then I would like to say a little bit about how surprising this election was. And I think the big explanation of all of these surprises is mandatory voting. We knew relatively little about those who never voted before. This was the first presidential election with mandatory voting for the entire adult population. And I think it's interesting to read what some colleagues are talking about regarding who are the voters of Parisi also. They, apparently there is a correlation with those who voted rechazo for the first constitutional round. They are young, they are male, they are relatively uneducated and lower income earners, and they have little political experience. So I guess what they share is that they are pissed off. And I remember this, I don't know if you know, Redondito de Ricota. They had this song, I don't know what I want, but I want it now. And I think there is something like that going on with these voters. Things are getting complex. 3 hours ago, Parisi said that he was not going to give away his votes. He said that all of the two of them, doesn't matter who wins, are going to be really bad presidents, doing a very bad government. They said he was not going to vote support fachos or comunachos, the fascists and communists, in a very despective way. And he also said that if you want votes, go to the street and win them. So he's sending a very graphic message to the opposition. I don't think he's going to maintain this position for the rest of history, but he's making a very, very important point there. So what are you going to give me? You know, what a journalist asked him, so are you going to talk to them? Are you going to call them? He said, no, they have to call me. I'm not going to talk to anyone. So that's the mystery, what is going to happen, and I hope Patricio will help us to understand that. And I want to say a last thing. I didn't control my time, so I don't know how bad or how good I am doing, but I want to say a little bit about sociostructural stuff, which is what I know more about. And I am worried about the future because I think the sociostructural conditions that gave birth to the social explosion are still there. I'm not saying that there's going to be another social explosion. This is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the conditions that were there, I mean, those who earn between 1.5 lines of poverty and 3 lines of poverty represent about 40% of the entire Chilean population. They have very low quality jobs. They spend more than they earn. The four lower quintiles earn less than they spend. They spend money in food. They spend money in utilities. They spend money in transportation, in healthcare, and anything like, I don't know, the death of a family member, a divorce, the loss of unemployment will make their family economy a mess. So, and I'm not sure the current candidates are, or particularly Cast, who is the most likely winner, is looking at these socio-structural conditions. I don't think that there is going to be a structural retrenchment very visible, but there will be something like that. He wants to cut the spending and it's not clear where is he going to get the money from. So thank you very much. And I want to hear my colleagues.
Thanks. Lucia.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Rossana, David, Patricio. Thank you for the invitation. Back here. The last time I was here, it was COVID. So everything was really closed. So I'm happy to be here. So I have, I of course agree with what Rossana and David has said. I just want to talk about 4 elements. One is ni facho ni comunacho. And this is Parisi, you know, he was really intelligent in making his point that he was not a political player. He is the surprise of this election. And I think that he is the surprise because he allowed his voters to become a third of the presence in many areas. He has also become the bisagra. You know, his 14 congressmen will be key in order to allow for changes either from the left or the right. Just to mention that in the previous election, he had 6 congressmen, and all of them actually, you know, left the party, some to the left and some to the right. So this is a very confusing political party. But he has the key for constitutional changes nowadays in Chile. And this is really a very hectic, weird guy. Very, you know, well, whatever. He had the other thing that I think is important about this no facho ni comunacho person is that although he talked about security and migration, he actually talked a lot about economic things and the problems of society. And he spent very little money in his campaign. He actually talked to people through WhatsApp. There are instances, I talked to some of the people on his first ring of friends, and they told me that he has answered at least 4 million WhatsApps. He has been answering everyone. So if you send a WhatsApp to someone in his party, you will get an answer, well, from him. And most of the answers were about money. You are not going to pay the same amount of bills for the light. You're going to receive money. So mixing liberal, socialist, communist, and very neoliberal ideas. And I think that he was clever enough not to just, concentrate on the security and migration agenda that was the center of the discussion in the left and the right. So there are some doubts for me on the Parisi situation. First of all, I am not sure if he will become the leader of that party during the next administration. If he's not the leader, perhaps the leader will be Pamela Giles, and she's perhaps worse than him. As David's and Rossana's, she can negotiate everything. In fact.
Wait, worse in what sense?
Worse because she's really a populist. She is really, yesterday I was listening to her and she said that she's open to discuss more retirement from the pension funds, even though everyone is in agreement that the retirements of the pension funds were, the basis of the whole economic collapse. She's just, sending messages that she has the keys of the next administration negotiation capacities. And she's been from the Mir all the way to wherever she's now, and she's a political figure, but also she is a television figure. She knows how to play the television area. And for me, because Parisi, the last time Parisi won, he got third, and then he left. Because he's busy on other stuff. He just, the politics is very boring when you have the power. And I am not sure that if he will continue to be in Chile, the only, good situation about this third of the vote is that Parisi's sister got elected. And actually, she got elected because of Pamela Giles. Pamela Giles, put her into in the Congress. So perhaps the sister, as in the Milei's case, will try to play a role. But my sense is that we will not have a clear understanding on how the political divide will work and how Cast, I'm pretty sure Cast will be the next president, by the way. As Rossana and David mentioned, I am not sure how Cast is going to negotiate with Parisi's votes on the Congress. So the only thing that I think Parisi has that is frightening for me is that he has the votes of the young, all youngsters, more vulnerable in the marginalized areas, but also middle class people are voting for him because they're fed up of the whole, political debate, the whole political structure, and they really are frustrated with limited changes that we have in Chile. The second, so Parisi is a, question mark, and I think that we will have to be very open to see what happens with him and his party, a congressman that they have. The second element is what is going to happen with the left wing. For many years, this government tried to organize just one coalition, one political coalition from the left. And of course, that idea didn't work, so we have two. And in this election, the left, the Frente Amplio, and the Socialist Democratic part, which is, those who were in the previous governments, I am not sure if they are going to continue working together. My sense is that we will see fights for the leadership of that area. Of course, you have President Boric, who can play a role in that, either if he likes it or not. Also, you have many other, young people from the Frente Amplio. we don't have that many young people from the Socialist Democratic Party. Even in Sulsa didn't got elected, but Ciccardini and many others from the Socialist Party who are less disciplined than the previous guys, they got elected and they got lots of votes. So I'm not, I think that this is another area that we have to take into account, you know, the renovation of people and leadership in the left. Of course, this is a very weird left, because this is a left that says that migrants are not welcome in Chile. This is a left that said that we have to enforce more security. This is a left that was part of the most punitive government in the last 13 years in Chile, which is President Boric's government. So the whole left-right axis will be redefined, I think. So the third element that I think is important after the election is the importance of the Senate. Senate. The Senate. And this is key because the right thought, and all polls show us before the election that the right will have the majority in the Senate, and that is not the case. One of the things that David mentioned, you know, the vacuum of the center. However, it's really interesting what happened with the the Christian Democratic Party, because they kept 2 senators and they kept some, you know, congressmen. So they will also play a role in there. I am not sure what is going to happen with the Republican Party, with Cass, but I'm pretty sure that it will be very difficult for them to govern with their initial public policies, because they do not have the power to change it from this in the Senate. And in the Senate, you have people who are not really willing to negotiate with for money. I'm in the TV. So being said that, I think that one of the most important things about this election and the second round in December is that this is a highly an emotional moment in Chile, in which people were, you know, Chile, as David and Rossana mentioned before, Chile is a country with the highest level, you know, levels of fear in Latin America. Fear of crime, but fear of everything, basically. And there is another element that is important, is that also is one of the countries with the highest levels of lack of trust. You know, we do not trust anyone, not only institutions, we don't trust the other. So this, you know, fear and lack of trust situation, along with the estallido social and the problems of violence and the arriving of migrants from Venezuela, but this is an issue that has a long-standing presence in the political agenda, because before they were the Haitians, the people from Haiti, has opened a huge door. I wouldn't say for left or right discussions, but for a discussion that is very Chilean center, that is, you know, very afraid, is very distrust of everything that is being discussed. This and for that reason, I think this is an emotional moment that will perhaps try to redefine the relation between the state and society. I am not sure what is going to happen with that, but I can see from the research that I'm doing that, you know, the whole perspective that Chileans have about the state has changed a lot in 5 years after the estallido. And many people who were, in fact, in favor of changing society as a whole, nowadays feel that changing society as a whole requires a complete change of the political elite, whatever that means. And of course, the political elite includes the president, Boric, includes all the youngsters who were supposed to be renovating politics. So my sense is that we will continue to see, you know, these, I don't know if call it alarming, but perhaps alarming, you know, signals of political decay and also political limited representation. Just want to mention briefly that as David and Rossana mentioned, security and criminality was key in this election. And anti-migration also was key in this election. However, it was key because everyone shared the same idea. From President Boric or, well, perhaps Artes, this very left-wing person. But everyone shared the same punitive perception that society is threatened by organized crime. And of course, we still are the safest countries in Latin America. Our homicide levels are, very low. But the sense of vulnerability that society has and the incapacity of the left wing to tackle that narrative, I think is gonna, hinder any possibility from the left to change that that area of public policy definitions in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks. Good. Pato. Rob. Is there?
I've been here all paying attention to what everyone has said. So I have a little presentation, and it'll only take about 5 minutes to go through it. So let me just share it with you. But I do want to start out by saying that I am not from Chile, or I was not born in Chile. So the four of us here are migrants. My parents are Chilean. I've lived outside Chile for the last 38 years. So I guess Chileans are going to be very upset that the panel at Harvard doesn't have any Chileans, and the anti-immigrant sentiment will keep on growing in Chile. Now, what I think happened on Sunday is the best electoral results in a presidential election for the right ever since universal suffrage. So this is important to keep in mind. The reasons as to why I think David, Rossana, and Lucia have discussed, but what is it that we expected? So a week ago, everyone would have said, well, the left-wing candidate, Janet Jara, is going to get about 30% of the votes. The four right-wing candidates are going to get about 60% of the votes, and Kass would probably make it to the runoff. But Kaiser is doing slightly better in the most recent polls. What is it that we actually got? Jara got 26.8%, lower than expected. Kass got 24%, slightly higher than expected. The four right-wing candidates got 70%, better than expected. And the three candidates that called themselves right-wingers, Parisi, the populist right-wing candidate, did not call himself a right-winger. He, as Rossana mentioned, he defined himself as ni facho, ni comunacho, nor fascist, nor a communist. But the three ones that said, yes, I'm right-wing, got 50.4% of the vote. And that's the best showing for the right in Chile ever since universal suffrage was established. And there's no buts. I mean, this is pretty clear. It was a good, strong showing for right-wing candidates. What did we get in the presidential election? Everybody expected the right to do very well, but I suppose David and the other few people who actually pay attention to electoral rules in Chile anticipated that the division among right-wing parties into two coalitions was going to hurt them, and this is what we ended up getting. This is the composition of the Senate. Only 23 seats in the Senate were up for re-election, and if you look at the blues are the left, and a couple of independents were both elected in 2021, and they vote with the left. We're going to have an equal split in the Senate, 25 seats to the left, 25 seats to the right. The right includes two former Christian Democrats. These 20 here include the other two Christian Democrats. There are two former Christian Democrats who are here. One of them got reelected, the other one was already here. So, and the yellow are the far right, the Cambio por Chile, the Kaiser, coalition. So the Senate is going to be equally split. You can sort of question whether some of these moderates will end up voting with the right, or some of the Democrats, the former Christian Democrats, will end up voting with the left. But there's only room for moderate reforms. No radical reforms will pass, and in that sense, we're exactly in the same place where we are today, or where we were 4 years ago. There was this contest in the 1930s, this alleged contest in the UK, for which was the most boring, the most dullest headline in a newspaper, and the winner allegedly was a small earthquake in Chile, not many dead. So this is what the election produced this time around. Small earthquake, but not many dead. The Senate is pretty much evenly split, and the pivotal voters, the ones that will decide, the median voter in the Senate, is going to be a moderate. So only moderate legislation can pass. But it was exactly the same when Boric won the election 4 years ago. The sort of left-wing majority wasn't strong enough in the legislature to advance their bills, and Boric had to form a broader coalition with more moderate left-wingers. Now, Cast, who will likely win the election, is going to have to form a moderate coalition with right-wingers, moderate right-wingers. This is what we got in the Chamber of Deputies. So pretty much the same. The left got 65 seats, and the right got 76 seats. And then Parisi, and Rossana talked a little about Parisi's legislative delegation has some people who are in the far left and some people who are in the far right. So the Parisi delegation is really an anti-elite delegation. This is what brings them together. It's not that they are left or right, they just despise the elites. But the good thing for them is that most Chileans despise the elites. So this is what stands behind the estallido social in 2019, and this is what explains almost everything that has happened in Chile in the past few years. In fact, the main reason why Cast did so well, and Parisi and Kaiser did relatively well, and Matei did not do well, Matei was the candidate of the traditional right-wing parties, is that Matei was associated with the elites. And Kaiser, Cast, and Parisi were sort of anti-elite candidates. And everybody hates the elites. I'm sorry to say that to the people at Harvard, but the one thing that President Trump does, and people don't really care that much about, is going after Harvard, right? Because Harvard is perceived as sort of the elites, and people kind of hate the elites. That's true in Chile. That's also true in the US. And I'm being part of that elite. I understand how bad it makes us feel. But the reason why Matei did horrible was because he was perceived as the candidate of the elite. And in fact, the one chance that Jara has in the runoff is for the elite to sort of stand behind Cast now and campaign for Cast. So if we see the business leaders coming out and saying, we need to vote for Cast, and Cast is the best thing that happens to Chile, then voters might end up wanting to vote for Jara because they despise the elites. Boric won in 2021 on an anti-elite platform as well, and the same thing will happen this time around. So there's only moderate room for moderate reforms in Congress, so not much will happen. I was looking for a scenario where Jara can win the runoff. And these are the conditions that I sort of identified. Cast would need to become even more radical to the right, which I don't think he will do. But if he keeps some sort of pushing to the right and demanding huge tax cuts and huge spending cuts, then he can potentially sort of alienate moderate voters. Jara would have to distance herself from Boric and suspend her membership in the Communist Party. The business elite would have to come strong for Cast. Cast would be Matei-sized, so she would become the new Matei if she gets the support of the business elite. Then we would also need for President Trump to warn Chileans not to vote for a communist, because that would produce sort of a rally round the flag effect in Chile, and support for Jara would increase. And then if all those things were to happen, then Jara could probably win by a very, very small margin. But I don't think that's going to happen. So what will happen if Kass wins, which is what I expect to happen in December? Kass can forget right away that he only got 24% of the votes in the first round. So 3 out of 4 Chileans voted against Kass, voted for somebody else. If he thinks that his vote share in the runoff is his real level of support, he will go through the same wrong motions that Boris went through in 2022 when he took office. So Boris thought that he had the support of a majority of Chileans, when the majority of Chileans in the runoff voted against. If Kass wins this time around, it's because the majority of Chileans just don't want Jara, not because they are in love with Kass. So if Kass remembers, if Kass realizes that he needs to govern from the center, then he can be successful. If he moves too far right, he's soon going to see his support decline, and then he will lose support in Congress because legislators run away from unpopular presidents. How can he govern from the center? He just needs to embrace Matei's economic plan. Matei's plan was really a center-right plan, reasonable, something that would probably do well for Chile. So if he embraces, if he sort of conducts a hostile takeover of the right, then he can be successful. If he moves farther right, he will not be successful. He can also make some gains by fighting against the deep state, the government bureaucracy, public sector workers, all those political appointees. So if he goes after them, he will probably earn the support of the people because people despise the elites and they believe that the left-wing parties have captured the state bureaucracy. If he delivers some basic results on crime and migration, he can also keep popular support and build his popular support. He needs to do a few symbolic things, right? So he needs to put criminals, foreign criminals on planes and send them to El Salvador. That would probably be illegal or violating human rights, but that would be very popular with Chileans, and Chileans would say, well, things are happening now, and he's really taking on crime. Now, my concern with Kass is that he already had power. In the second constitution writing process, his party had a plurality and right-wing parties had a majority. So in the first constitution writing process, the left drafted a text that was too far left and people rejected it. In the second constitution writing process, the right, led by Kass, drafted a text that was too far right and people also rejected it. So if Kass does what he did when he had power, his government is going to be a fiasco and a failure. But if he learned the lessons and he moves to the center and governs as a center-right candidate, I think he can be more successful. But I will stop with my remarks there because I think I went over my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me just clarify, Pato, that the polls show a solid majority of Americans back Harvard, not Trump, in his assault on Harvard. So let's be empirically clear.
Okay, so I'm sorry, that must have been just the NYU administrators who are sort of.
Let me lead off with a question, and not everyone should feel obligated. We have 4 of you, so you take up the question. You don't all have to take up all the questions. I wanted to pick up on something that David led off with, but several mentioned, which is the collapse of the political center, but also the fact that this seems to be much more of a supply side problem than a demand side problem. So this is not a Chile phenomenon. You see this in similar dynamics in Colombia, in Peru, in Argentina, Brazil, and elsewhere, that particularly in ballotage systems, you get extreme candidates on left and right qualifying for the runoff, and the center invariably finishing somewhere between 3rd and 5th, and the most traditional politician always ends up 5th. and that was Evelyn, this time. But what's driving this collapse of the center if, in fact, electorates haven't shifted much at all? If most electorates, including the Chilean, continue to be broadly located in the center? David, do you want to lead off with that?
I wish I could answer that question. I think it deserves a complete research on that. I don't have a proper answer. The first reaction, I would say, institutions. In a way, how we set up our primaries in case they exist, for instance, help to clean the environment of candidates, and usually or many times what we see is that somehow more centrist candidates for the presidency get elected if you have universal party primaries at the same time, on the same place, so my first reaction would be institutions. It's a matter of how we set up our electoral system that includes, for sure, party primaries in case they exist. Maybe I am too biased with the primarias in Uruguay or las PASO in Argentina, but still, these are the few places where you have, or you had in Argentina. I mean, in Argentina, there is no more PASO, but where you have universal primaries simultaneously that help to destillar, how do you say, distill? Candidates that tend to be more, or at least political parties assume that they are more prone to be elected. So you are not necessarily elect extremist candidates, despite the fact that they represent better a political party than not. So the point is that at the bottom line, regarding that question, I would say that I think we agree, at least with Pato, based on his presentation, that here we are not seeing a drastic shift to the right of the Chilean electorate. What we have seen is an abandonment that the citizenry left the left. In a way, they oppose this government, and given the emptiness that we have in the middle, the only place to land is the right. So today it's about anti-Boric, anti-this left, rather than Chileans become, extreme right-wingers.
Yes.
Don't you think that it's also because Jara was really a bad candidate? Because if you had Tomás Bodanovich, I mean, in the same situation, you have a younger, perhaps whatever, good looking, very manageable candidate such as him. He actually moved lots of votes in Maipú. Perhaps that the result would be different. I'm pretty sure that one of the, in order to realize whether people are from the left or not now, we will have to wait a little bit more, because of course Jara, being member of the Communist Party, allow many people who are actually militants of left-wing parties not to vote for her. Many of my friends decided not to vote for her because, the Communist Party still is linked to many, international policies that are not well recognized. So I am not sure about, the complete disappearance of the left. I think that we have a problem of leadership in the left. And that's why I think that in the next 18 months, one of the most important issues will be what the role of President and the role of the younger generation from either the Frente Amplio and the Socialist Party, no?
Rossana.
Yes, I'm going to say something that I really despise. I will do something that I really despise, which is talk about things that I don't know. And I'm saying this because I think there is something deeper going on that has to do probably with what Lucia was saying about the Parisi voters. That is the way in which citizens know about politics, get information about politics, and it has a lot to do with social media. And I want to say something. When the Charlie Kirk event happened, you know who explained what was going on to me? My teenage kids who are in social media, who knew exactly what Fuentes was doing, who knew exactly who the supporters and who the enemies of Kirk were. And what I'm saying with this is that the reason, in part, perhaps, we don't understand the Parisi, or we didn't anticipate the Parisi event, was because he is making another type of, it's not the politics we study in the 90s. It's not what we learned when Steve and David and I and Pato went to the university. That has nothing to do with that. So I wonder if there is something we are missing related to, well, Pato has a project on that, and I'm interested in what he's going to say. But I think we are there is a missing link regarding social media, the way people get information, post-verdad, or whatever it's called in English. So, okay, I'll start talking about things I don't know.
Thanks, Pato.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of points to the conversation. The first is that, and Rossana made a reference to this research project that we have on public opinion, political values, and mass, traditional and new media. And we've conducted this project for 4 years now, and even before the estallido social, I mean, we were very much aware that people are discontent with the elites, and that's the Parisi voters. So. I don't know who was surprised by the Parisi voters, but all the polls have been telling us that people are discontent with the elites, and the polls have been telling us that for years. And the estallido social, I mean, everybody remembered during the estallido social that people were discontent with the elites, but then they kind of forgot that people were discontent with the elites, and now the Parisi vote reminded them again that people are discontent with the elites, and that I think is strongly behind the results in the election on Sunday. Now, ever since 2009, every election in Chile, in every presidential election in Chile, the incumbent coalition has lost. So the last time that an incumbent coalition candidate won in Chile was in 2005. So predicting that the incumbent coalition would lose is kind of the easy prediction in Chile. We have had alternation in power in Chile since 2009. So no matter which candidate you will have on the left, that candidate would start from a very low point because presidential approval for the outgoing president is pretty low. So I don't think it's the characteristics of the candidate. Probably a different candidate would have done better than Jara because Jara's sort of too far left. But I'm not sure that things would have been much different because people are upset with the elites, and people were also upset with the outgoing government because there isn't just enough economic growth. I mean, people are worried about crime. But if we look back in every election since 2009, the main concern, or one of the two leading concerns, has been crime. So, I mean, crime is a constant, it's not a variable. Crime has been the main concern of Chileans since 1999. Sometimes the economy goes up, pensions go up, but it's always pensions and crime, the economy and crime. So insecurity and Lucia knows this way better than everyone else. I mean, insecurity has been a constant in Chile. Actual crime levels have worsened, though relative to the rest of Latin America, they remain relatively low. But people don't compare themselves with El Salvador or Brazil in Chile. Chileans compare themselves with the expectations they have and what they remember idealized that, or what they idealized was the past in Chile. So I disagree with the notion that we were surprised by anything that happened on Sunday. none of what happened on Sunday was actually surprising. And it's not going to be surprising if, as governs from the far right, that he will quickly lose support. I mean, David made that point very clearly. If the government moves too far left or too far right, people just abandon the government because people, in essence, want, I mean, people are like humans or Americans, if you want. All Americans want a sports car, but they want a sports car that functions like like an SUV, right? So, and that's the real problem that we have in Chile. People want a government that is going to be moderate, but they want a government that looks like Milei with a chainsaw. But then they want the government to govern as a moderate government. And that was the problem that Boric had. And that's going to be the problem that Past will have if he governs as a far-right candidate.
Any questions? Alisha.
Okay, great. So that's a good bridge, Pato, that I want to ask a little bit more about what you foresee in terms of caste government. So first, institutionally, faced with stalemate in the Senate, you can imagine many Latin American presidents deciding to govern by decree, have some sort of emergency order, far-right radical agenda that perhaps caste wants to try to implement. So how likely do you see that sort of institutional move? And then second, Lucia, I thought you were going to talk a little bit more about the actual content of security and immigration policies. So I want to push a little bit more. Sounds like Chileans would be happy to send, all criminals to El Salvador and have a Bukele-style administration. What do you think is actually likely to happen? And given the sort of pressure to deliver short-term results on crime and security, what are the first, kind of 100 days of security proposals going to look like?
I have a question for Pato, for Patricio. If you could unpack a little bit about this anti-elite perspective or opinions, and because you can think about that as a broad critique that could go left in some scenarios, but it has gone right in this case. And why do you think that is? What kind of anti-elitism is going on in Chile?
Why don't you guys take those and then we'll do another round. You want to start, Pato?
Okay, so yeah. In the case of what Cass will do, he doesn't really need to pass any significant legislation. But if he wants to pass legislation, it's going to have to be moderate legislation. But he's probably not going to have the votes for a significant tax cut for corporations in the Senate because the moderate right doesn't want that kind of a economic chop, and Chile doesn't really need that kind of an economic chop. What Cass is going to try to advance is a pretty simple sort of anti-woke agenda, which it's a popular agenda in Chile. I mean, it's the the left is for they and them, and Cass is for you. Right. So Cass is going to identify a few educational programs that teach kids about transgender rights, those kinds of things, and he's going to identify them and start going against them, saying, look, we have some traditional values and some traditional views. He's going to do that, and that's going to be popular because the general perception is that the state spends more on sort of wokeism than on real people like us, right? So, and I think he's going to go in that direction. He's also going to try to eliminate red tape. So he's going to go against bureaucracies, but using the argument that that reduces red tape or permisología, as they call it in Chile. And he doesn't need to pass legislation for that. And he's going to do some symbolic things to reassert sort of the importance of the state. He's going to bring the state back in, if we put it in academic terms, and he's going to say, look, the police is now going to have presence and people are going to respect the national police, and we're going to sort of enter with the national police on all those Mapuche communities that don't let even census takers go into those communities. That cannot happen in a well-functioning republic. So he's going to embrace that idea of state capacity. And I think that's what he's going to advance. So I don't see him as trying to sort of fight against a Congress trying to pass bills that he doesn't need. I just don't see that happening. And there is an anti-elite sentiment, but there is also an anti-incumbent sentiment. So as soon as you win the election, you become part of that elite that is not responsive to people's needs. So the next anti-elite candidate is probably going to be a leftist. I don't think it's going to be a Paris. It's going to be a leftist that says, look, these smug pilots don't know how to fly or have been flying the plane for way too long, and they are not responsive to the people who thinks that I should fly that plane, even if I don't have any experience flying planes. And that's what we're going to see everywhere. So I think what's going to happen in Chile in the next 4 years is pretty clear and very predictable. The government will become the new incumbent elite government. People are going to be dissatisfied with the government, and 4 years from now, they are going to vote for somebody who represents a change from that new entrenched, established elite. Unless, of course, there is economic growth and there is jobs and opportunities and inflation is under control, and then people are going to be less dissatisfied with the elites. But my suspicion is that they are still going to vote for alternation in power.
Lucia, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Cast won under the a program that is called a state of emergency. So one of the things that he will be able to do, thanks to our laws from this government, is that he can put the armed forces on the streets. And that is a policy that I will really not be surprised if he decided to, because of the state of emergency, he decided to take the armed forces to, and a very spectacular way into the, of course, metropolitan region, in some specific areas. And of course, being, having the armed forces on the streets will lower the sense of insecurity. He can do that for 15 days without asking the Congress. Also, because of the laws that were passed during this government, there are many instances in which the police without asking anybody. So they will do that. We have an increasing level of police fire against civilians in Chile. And this is not, a coincidence. So my sense is that CAS will have this narrative of, more military presence, at least for a while. Then he continued with the presence of the military on the southern part, because he had, they're there forever. There is also a narrative and a symbolic definitions on strengthening the power of the police. The next government will not be able to do much because we have done everything. We have put more money on the police than ever before. We have put more money on the public prosecutor than ever before. We have houses that are, blindadas, armor for public prosecutor, for people who are never going to fight any organized crime, people whatsoever. But, we have been doing that. And I say we as the center left government, but of course people did not trust the government. So people requires more evidence. And the other area that I think that will be enhanced is the use of technology. So we will have more CCTV, we will have, these recognition, face recognition cameras everywhere. And things like that will increase the sense of security. And this is something that not only that I think that they will do, they put it on the programs. The other area that I believe they will tackle is in anti-migration. They will have more shows, because we have been deporting a lot of people. It's the same thing that Trump and Obama. Obama deported more people. We have more shows with Trump. well, the same thing is happening in Chile, you know. Boric has deported more people, or almost more people than Piñera. However, the spectacularization of the deportation process was higher during Piñera. And I am expecting the whole, you know, television program with the president and, you know, all the Venezuelans and Colombians being kicked off from the country. They will close the frontiers, but we are not expecting many people coming to Chile. Actually, the number of people, you know, moving to Chile has lowered in the last 18 months already. But also, I think that they will focus on the anti-women agenda. I mean, anti-women in the sense of, you know, feminist agenda. They will go all the way into the women agenda that Cast's wife thinks is good, which is a highly conservative, highly, you know, religious agenda. And my other sense is that they will go against the agenda de cuidados, because I don't know how to call it in English, but the agenda de cuidados could become, you know, the medular structure of the legacy of Boric. So they have to destroy that, whatever type of legacy the Boric government is leaving. So those are the areas in which also this Cast government will try to change stuff. And in terms of insecurity, the most important thing is for the right wing to stop talking about it. You know, perhaps Patricio knows more than I do, but most of the media discussion about insecurity is being funded by the discussion of political elites on insecurity. You know, this is the government that said that insecurity is the highest in the history of Chile. Former Undersecretary of Security Monsalves said that all 5 gangs, the stronger gangs in the world, were in Chile. So of course that allows for a conversation that, you know, increases fear. So my sense is that they will try to lower the discussion too.
We only have a few minutes. I wanted to give Joaquim a chance to ask a question.
All right, thank you. I'll skip the preamble. I guess my question is a two-parter. First, what explains Cast failing to consolidate the anti-incumbent vote since 2021? And on that note, what explains also the rise of Kaiser? We talked a lot about Parisi. We didn't talk much about Kaiser. So he ran to the right of Cast. So I just wanted to hear your opinions on this general.
Anybody want to jump on that?
Let me quickly take on that. So I think, Lucia, you were referring to the family caregiver sort of role, right? The state subsidizing the caregiver role. First, we'll say that there's no money for that, and I think it's going to be the end of it, right? So I think the real dispute is going to be a government that says, look, or think of Soran Mamdani saying that there is no problem big enough that the government cannot solve, as opposed to the typical Chicago boy that says that all the problems have to be left to the market to be solved. And I think that's going to be the tension that we'll see in the next couple of years. And it's part about perception, but it's also about the estallido social, right? So the big debate about the role of the police goes back to the estallido social. Some people saying, el que nos salta es Paco, right? So demeaning the police, using the word Paco. I mean, all those ideas that the police are really kind of the abolish the police sentiment against those that argue with the Blue Lives Matter kind of argument in the US. I think that's exactly the dispute that we're seeing. People perceive that Boric did not, or the police did not have the support of Boric, and now people would perceive that the police has the support of Jose Antonio Cast because he's sort of iron fist, law and order, and they believe the left is not iron fist and law and order. There was this great symbol during the estallido social, the perro matapacos, right? A dog that whose name was kill police officers or kill cops. And the left kind of laughed at that and said, well, you know, it's kind of a funny thing to show. And the right would say, well, would you say like mata mapuchos or mata judíos? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. This is offensive against the police. We need to support the police. I think that simple change, a government that comes in and is perceived as supportive of the police, replacing a government that is perceived embracing the abolish the police argument, is just going to make enough of a difference for people to think that the insecurity problem is being solved. So it has nothing to do with actual numbers. It has a lot to do with perceptions. And as for Kaiser, I think the support for Kaiser came from the fact that Kast, anticipating that he could sort of win more support by moving center, move to the center, and Kaiser sort of occupy that space farther to the right. And Kaiser wasn't really thinking about this presidential election. I think Kaiser is thinking more about the next presidential election where he can become the new Kast, right? So the candidate that can embrace those iron fist law and order policies. But this is very similar to what we saw in the US. I mean, when you have a left-wing candidate that sort of embraces the notion of abolishing the police, then all you need is somebody who says, no, I support the police to come into office, and that produces a significant shift in perceptions.
Just an empirical question. Who is the left-wing candidate in the United States who supported abolishing the police?
And that would be Sir Mamdani.
Oh my God.
Well, he did. Sir Mamdani embraced the abolish the police. I mean, there's records of this. When he ran, he said, no, I want to work with the police. But before he ran, he protested with the abolish the police people. He's now more mature and he's going to be different when he becomes a mayor. But the suspicion among those in the right is this guy doesn't support the police.
Rossana.
Yes, I wanted to say something very quick about care policies and then something about Kaiser. Regarding care policies, I think many policies are going to be maintained but the narrative is going to change. So we are not going to talk about care, we are not going to talk about co-responsibility, but we will talk about family and protecting babies and protecting growing families and stuff like that. So that's probably going to be part of it. And regarding Kaiser, I think the anti-wokeism sentiment in Chile has been increasing, which is also tied to what Pato was saying, very elite. I don't know, it was seen as part of the elite, so a different elite. So there is an anti-woke thing, but also I think that Kast underestimated Kaiser. He really did not pay attention at all at the beginning, and it was a mistake. He was mostly fighting with the center right and trying to capture the center voter, as Patricio said, but he really underestimated Kaiser until it was too late.
If I can just jump in for
Final word, David.
Yeah, no, I think that Kast is the large winner at this moment. I mean, of course, he made a tactical choice of moving to the center, leaving all the normative agenda to the side, abortion, gay marriage, drugs, whatever, concentrating in crime and illegal immigration, knowing that he was risking an decision from the right, and that was happened. It is interesting, I believe, is that Pato mentioned that since 2009 we have been alterning coalitions time and time again, and this has a reason, but there is a correlation. Look, in 2006, the left has much more power to mobilize and to go to the street. We know that in Chile in particular. In 2006, we have the Pingüino movement. Pingüino that, we had Boric among those guys. Then in 2009, we have an alternation. And since then, we have been alterning all the time. First step by the left and second as a reaction, the right. you know. We have the estallido social, then we have the first convention. It was a huge failure. Then we have the second attempt. I think in that point, I disagree with Pato in the term that it was disapproved. Yeah, it was not approved by the citizenry, but at that moment, it could have been read as a victory for the right. They were extremely happy with the statu quo. They tried to bet much more. They didn't know if it's going to be successful or not. It wasn't. But in any case, they were happy. And then in the election of 2022, we bet the center, for sure, bet for Boric. In facing a cast, it was seen as a Cro-Magnon, a very conservative guy. At that moment, the values agenda was at the top of the line, right? Against gay marriage, inclusive language, blah, blah, blah. So people from the left supported Boric. These candidates, and referring to Jara, she is the DNA of this government. She has been at the center of this government. So maybe if we had another candidate, it had been a little bit better. It could have been, but I don't know. I don't think it's gonna make a huge change. But now I think Cast is the large winner of this game. And just by making a small parenthesis, today Lula just promulgated a law that forbids inclusive language in the Brazilian public administration. So we've seen one of the flagships of the left, forbidden inclusive language at the public administration level in Brazil. It's crazy what's going on. So I think that Cast made all these movements in a very smart way for his interest, and he sacrificed a small portion of voters to the right, knowing that maybe Kaiser or someone else would have run by themselves. But Cast is the winner.
I just
Yeah.
want to say that there is this conspiracy theory that says that Cast not pays, but enhances the possibility of Kaiser to be there, and because that was a barrier for him not to be the ultra right candidate.
It might be the case. I don't know.
I have to close. Before I close, let me just remind you all that next Tuesday, we have Nobel laureate Maria Cortado. Hopefully, it's confirmed so far. And please join me in thanking David, Altman, Castiglioni, and Patricio. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.